In a bustling city where life moved at breakneck speed, there lived a young woman who blended seamlessly into the crowd. She wasn't loud or flashy. She didn't wear expensive clothes or carry herself with an air of superiority. Instead, she was quiet, observant, and focused on her own path. Her name was Maya, but to most people around her, she was just another face in the sea of commuters rushing to catch trains, buses, and cabs. Maya had built a simple yet fulfilling life for herself. By day, she worked as a software engineer at a tech company downtown, typing lines of code that powered apps used by thousands of people every day. But when evening rolled around, she transformed into something entirely different. At a small martial arts studio tucked away in a corner of the city, Maya taught self-defense classes. It wasn't about making money. It was her way of giving back. She believed everyone deserved to feel safe, especially women and children who often found themselves vulnerable in public spaces. Her love for martial arts began years ago, almost by accident. Growing up, she'd been shy and introverted, often bullied for being too quiet or too weak. One summer, her parents enrolled her in a karate class, hoping it would help boost her confidence. That decision changed everything. Over time, Maya discovered not only strength in her body but also resilience in her spirit. She trained hard, learning techniques from various disciplines like Krav Maga, Muay Thai, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Each punch, kick, and block became a lesson in discipline and empowerment. By the time she reached adulthood, Maya wasn't just physically strong. She carried an inner calmness that made her stand out, even if no one noticed it right away. One chilly evening, after a long day at work, Maya boarded the subway home. The train was packed as usual, with tired office workers, students lugging heavy backpacks, and families trying to navigate the chaos. As she stepped inside, she scanned the car for a seat. Near the front, she spotted 3 men sitting comfortably. In the priority seating area, the section reserved for women, elderly passengers, and those with disabilities. These seats were clearly marked, and signs above them reminded everyone to give them up if someone more deserving came along. Yet these men showed no intention of moving. Maya hesitated for a moment. She could easily find another spot further, back standing among the crowd like so many others did. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the exhaustion weighing down her shoulders after hours of coding. Or maybe it was the frustration bubbling inside her chest, knowing how unfair the world could be sometimes. Whatever it was, she decided enough was enough. Taking a deep breath, she walked over and sat down in one of the empty priority seats beside the men. The reaction was immediate. The man closest to her turned his head sharply, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked, his voice loud enough to draw stares from nearby passengers. His tone dripped with hostility, as though daring her to challenge him. Before Maya could respond, another man leaned forward, his sneer twisting into a cruel grin. "Yeah, this isn't your place," he said mockingly. Without warning, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face, a sharp, stinging blow meant to humiliate her into submission. For a split second, the entire train seemed to freeze. Gasps echoed through the car as shocked passengers watched the scene unfold. Some recoiled instinctively, while others fumbled for their phones to record what was happening. No one stepped forward to intervene. Fear gripped the room like a vice, but Maya wasn't afraid. Pain shot through her cheek where the slap had landed, but her mind was already racing ahead. Years of training kicked in automatically, sharpening her focus like a blade. She assessed the situation in milliseconds. 3 attackers, all bigger than her, but none particularly skilled or disciplined. Their arrogance would be their undoing. As the man who struck her leaned closer, ready to taunt her again, Maya sprang into action. With precision and speed, she grabbed his wrist, twisted it sharply, and used his own momentum to throw him off balance. He crashed onto the floor of the subway car, clutching his arm in pain. Before the other two could react, Maya pivoted toward the second man, delivering a swift elbow strike to his solar plexus. He doubled over, wheezing for air. The third assailant lunged at her, attempting to grab her shoulders, but she sidestepped effortlessly, hooking her leg behind his knee and sending him tumbling backward. It was over before anyone realized what had happened. In less than 7 seconds, all three men were sprawled across the floor, defeated and humiliated. The silence that followed was deafening. Passengers stared in awe, unsure whether to cheer or stay silent. Finally, one brave woman clapped hesitantly, breaking the tension. Others joined in, their applause growing louder until the entire car erupted in support. Someone shouted, "You go, girl," while another passenger called the police to report the assault. Maya stood amidst the aftermath, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth where the slap had landed, but her expression remained steady. For a brief moment, she knelt to check on the men lying on the floor, not because she felt sorry for them, but because she wanted to ensure they weren't seriously injured. They weren't. When the authorities arrived minutes later, they found Maya calmly explaining the events to witnesses. Officers handcuffed the three men, who now looked far less menacing than they had moments earlier. Passengers eagerly recounted how Maya had defended herself in justice with remarkable skill and efficiency. By the time she stepped off the train that night, videos of the altercation were already circulating online, accompanied by headlines like asterisk, "Woman takes down attackers in record time." Little did Maya know, this single act of courage would change her life forever. The moment the slap landed, the atmosphere on the subway shifted. It wasn't just the sound of flesh meeting flesh that echoed through the car, it was the shock, the disbelief, and the collective gasp from everyone who witnessed it. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. The man who had slapped her leaned back slightly, his lips curling into a smug grin, as if he expected Maya to shrink away in fear or embarrassment. After all, that's what usually happened when someone tried to assert dominance in such a crude way. But Maya didn't flinch. Her heart was pounding now, not out of fear, but out of something else, anger, maybe, or determination. She could feel the sting on her cheek, sharp and raw, but it wasn't pain that consumed her. It was clarity. Years of martial arts training kicked in almost instinctively. Her mind raced, analyzing the situation faster than most people could process what they were seeing. She noted how close the three men were sitting, their postures relaxed and careless, completely unaware of the storm about to hit them. They thought they were untouchable, but Maya knew better. Without hesitation, she acted as the man who slapped her leaned forward again. Likely to taunt her further, Maya moved like lightning. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, twisting it sharply in one fluid motion. His eyes widened in surprise as he lost balance, tumbling forward onto the floor of the subway car. The thud of his body hitting the ground silenced the murmurs around them. People stared, unsure of what they were witnessing. Was this really happening? But Maya wasn't done. The second man, seeing his friend go down, lunged at her with a growl, his fists clenched. He swung wildly, aiming for her face, but Maya ducked under his arm with ease. Before he could recover, she drove her elbow upward, striking him squarely in the chest. The force of the blow knocked the wind out of him, and he staggered backward, clutching his ribs. Gasping for air, he collapsed onto the nearest seat, defeated. Third man hesitated, clearly shaken by how quickly things had turned. He glanced at his fallen friends, then back at Maya, who stood calm and composed despite the chaos swirling around her. His arrogance got the better of him, though, and he charged at her, arms outstretched, trying to grab her. Maya sidestepped effortlessly, using his momentum against him. With a quick sweep of her leg, she hooked her foot behind his knee and sent him crashing to the floor. He landed hard, groaning in pain, his bravado evaporating instantly. It was over. In less than 7 seconds. Just moments ago, the three men had been confident bullies, ready to intimidate anyone who dared cross them. Now they lay sprawled across the subway car, humiliated and powerless. Passengers watched in stunned silence, their mouths agape. Then, slowly, the tension broke. Someone began clapping, a hesitant clap at first, followed by another, and then another. Soon, the entire train erupted in applause. Cheers filled the air as people celebrated the woman who had taken down 3 attackers with precision and grace. "Wow, did you see that?" One passenger whispered to another, still staring. At Maya in awe. "She's incredible." Someone else chimed in, shaking their head in disbelief. A young woman seated nearby pulled out her phone and started recording the aftermath, zooming in on the men lying defeated on the floor. "This is unbelievable," she muttered, half to herself, half to the camera. Within minutes, videos of the incident were being uploaded online, spreading like wildfire. Hashtags like #SubwayHeroin and #7 Seconds of Courage began trending before the train even reached its next stop. Maya, meanwhile, stood quietly in the middle of it all, catching her breath. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth where the slap had landed, but she barely noticed. Her focus remained sharp, her gaze steady. She knelt briefly to check on the men, ensuring none of them were seriously injured. Not because she cared about their well-being, she didn't, but because that's who she was, a disciplined fighter. Someone who believed in control, not cruelty. When she was satisfied they were okay, she straightened up and looked around. At the sea of faces watching her, some passengers approached her cautiously, offering words of support. "Are you all right?" An older woman asked, concern etched on her face. "I'm fine," Maya replied softly, touching her cheek gingerly. "Thank you." Others simply nodded in admiration, too overwhelmed to speak. One man handed her a tissue, which she accepted with a small smile. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, Maya felt oddly calm. This wasn't her first fight, nor would it be her last. But there was something different about tonight. Something bigger. When the train finally screeched to a halt at the next station, police officers boarded, alerted by calls from concerned passengers. Flashing lights reflected off the windows as they made their way through the car, surveying the scene. Officers quickly identified the 3 men, handcuffing them without resistance. They lay limp, their earlier bravado replaced by shame and defeat. As the authorities questioned witnesses, Maya calmly recounted what had happened. She didn't embellish or dramatize. She simply told the truth. "They attacked me," she said evenly. "I defended myself." Her tone carried no hint of pride or anger, just quiet resolve. Around her, passengers eagerly backed up her story, describing how she had handled herself with skill and composure. By the time the police finished taking statements, word of the incident had spread far beyond the confines of the subway car. Reporters gathered outside the station, microphones in hand, eager to capture the story of the woman who had took down 3 assailants in record time. Strangers approached her, asking for interviews or selfies. Social media buzzed with excitement as videos of the altercation racked up thousands of views within minutes. Through it all, Maya remained unfazed. She didn't seek attention or validation. To her, this was just another chapter in her life, a reminder that standing up for yourself wasn't just an option. It was a necessity. Still, she couldn't ignore the weight of what had happened. As she stepped off the train and into the cool night air, she felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, her actions would inspire others to find their own courage. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. By the time Maya stepped off the subway that night, her story was already racing ahead of her. Videos of the altercation had gone viral, spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about the woman who took down 3 attackers in just 7 seconds. Comments poured in from all corners of the internet, some praising her bravery, others marveling at her skill, and a few even calling her a real-life superhero. Strangers were sharing their own experiences of harassment on public transport, tagging her in posts and thanking her for standing up when so many others stayed silent. The attention was overwhelming, but Maya handled it with the same calmness she'd shown during the fight. When reporters swarmed her outside the station, shoving microphones in her face and firing questions at her, she didn't shy away. Instead, she spoke plainly, without any hint of arrogance or self-promotion. "I didn't want to fight," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "But when someone tries to take away your dignity, you have every right to defend yourself." Her words resonated deeply. Here was a woman who wasn't looking for fame or recognition. She was simply doing what she believed was right. That authenticity struck a chord with people. Over the next few days, news outlets picked up her story, turning her into an overnight sensation. Headlines like "Woman Fights Back Against Bullies on Subway" and asterisk, "How One Commuter Took Down 3 Attackers in Seconds," asterisk dominated newspapers and websites. Even late-night talk show hosts joked about her skills, imagining scenarios where she could teach Hollywood actors how to perform stunts. Despite the spotlight, Maya remained grounded. She returned to her routine as best she could, heading to work the next morning and teaching her martial arts class that evening. But things weren't entirely normal. At the office, coworkers greeted her with wide eyes and nervous smiles, unsure whether to congratulate her or treat her differently. Some approached her cautiously, asking if they could hear the full story. Others kept their distance, whispering among themselves whenever she walked by Dot at the martial arts studio. However, the atmosphere was different. Her students looked at her with newfound admiration, their respect for her growing tenfold. Parents of younger kids enrolled their children, specifically because of her reputation, hoping she could teach them how to protect themselves. Enrollment numbers skyrocketed, forcing her to add extra classes to accommodate the demand. One evening, after a particularly packed session, a teenage girl lingered behind while everyone else left. She looked hesitant, clutching her bag tightly. As she approached Maya, "Can I ask you something?" she said softly, avoiding eye contact. "Of course," Maya replied, setting down the pad she'd been using for drills. "What's on your mind?" The girl hesitated before blurting out, "Were you scared? On the train, I mean. When those guys attacked you?" Maya smiled gently, understanding the weight of the question. "Yes, I was scared," she admitted. Anyone would be, but being scared doesn't mean you can't act. Sometimes, fear is what pushes us to do what needs to be done. The girl nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've been scared too," she whispered. "My bus driver yelled at me once for sitting in the front seat. He said girls shouldn't sit there. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how." Maya placed a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder. "It's okay to feel afraid," she said. "But remember this, you deserve to take up space. You deserve to be treated with respect. And if someone tries to make you feel small, don't let them win. Stand tall, even if it feels hard." The girl wiped her tears and gave a small smile. "Thank you," she said before leaving. Watching her go, Maya felt a pang of sadness, but also hope. If her actions could inspire even one person to stand up for themselves, then maybe all the attention was worth it. As weeks passed, invitations began pouring in from schools, community centers, and organizations eager to hear her speak. They wanted her to share her story, to talk about resilience, courage, and the importance of self-defense. At first, Maya declined most of them, feeling uncomfortable with the idea of stepping into the role of a public figure. But eventually, she realized she had a platform and an opportunity to make a difference. So, she started accepting invitations, traveling to different neighborhoods to speak to groups of all ages. Each speech followed a similar pattern. She'd begin by recounting the events on the subway, keeping her tone conversational and relatable. Then, she'd shift gears, focusing less on herself and more on the bigger picture. "This isn't about me," she'd say, gesturing to emphasize her point. "It's about showing people that they don't have to accept being treated unfairly. Whether it's on a train, in a classroom, or at home, everyone deserves to feel safe and respected." Her talk struck a nerve, sparking conversations about safety and accountability in public spaces. Women shared stories of catcalls and unwanted advances. Men admitted to witnessing harassment but not knowing how to intervene. Parents expressed concerns about raising confident, assertive children in a world that often tried to silence them. Maya listened intently to each story, nodding along and offering advice when asked. She never claimed to have all the answers, but she encouraged people to start small, to speak up when they saw injustice, to support those who needed help, and to trust themselves when faced with difficult situations. Her influence extended beyond speeches. Local governments took notice of her advocacy, introducing stricter penalties for public harassment and launching campaigns to educate citizens about bystander intervention. Schools incorporated self-defense workshops into their curriculums, inspired by Maya's teachings. Even businesses got involved, hosting seminars on workplace safety and gender equality. Through it all, Maya stayed humble. She turned down lucrative offers to appear in commercials or endorse products, insisting that her mission wasn't about money. Instead, she focused on giving back, donating proceeds from speaking engagements to charities that supported survivors of violence and abuse. She also continued teaching martial arts, prioritizing underprivileged youth who might not otherwise have access to such resources. Despite the whirlwind of activity, Maya found moments of peace in her daily life. Early mornings became her sanctuary, a time when she could step outside and breathe in the crisp air before the city woke up. She'd walk through quiet streets, reflecting on everything that had happened since that fateful night on the subway. Sometimes, strangers would recognize her and stop to thank her. Other times, she'd blend seamlessly into the crowd, enjoying the anonymity. One morning, as she sipped coffee at a small cafe near her apartment, a man approached her table. He looked familiar, though she couldn't quite place him. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tentative. "Are you the woman from the train?" Maya nodded, bracing herself for another round of praise or questions. But instead, the man pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said earnestly. "Your story changed my perspective. I used to think staying quiet was the easiest way to avoid trouble. But seeing how you stood your ground, it made me realize I can do the same." His words caught Maya off guard. For so long, she'd thought of her actions as personal, something she did for herself. Hearing that her courage had inspired someone else to find their own was humbling and empowering. As the man thanked her again and walked away, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect, encouraging others to believe in their strength and stand up for what was right. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the journey was far from over. As weeks turned into months, Maya's story continued to grow, weaving its way into the fabric of everyday conversations. People didn't just see her as a woman who had defended herself on a subway, they saw her as a symbol of change, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt chaotic and unfair. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Some approached her with gratitude, others with curiosity, but all with a sense of admiration. What started as a single act of defiance had blossomed into something much bigger, a movement. Maya's speaking engagements became more frequent, taking her to towns and cities far beyond her own. She stood before crowds of hundreds, sometimes thousands, sharing not only her story but also practical advice for handling conflict and staying safe. Her talks were never rehearsed or overly polished. Instead, they felt like heartfelt conversations. She spoke about fear, vulnerability, and the importance of standing your ground, not out of aggression, but out of self-respect. Courage isn't about being fearless, she'd say, looking directly at the audience. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared. Her words resonated deeply, especially with women and young girls who often bore the brunt of societal pressures and harassment. After one event in a small community center, a mother approached Maya with tears streaming down her face. Clutching the hand of her teenage daughter, she said, "My girl has been bullied at school. 4 years. She thinks she's weak because she doesn't fight back. But after hearing you today, she told me she wants to learn self-defense." The daughter, shy and hesitant, looked up at Maya with wide eyes. "Can I really do it?" she asked softly. Maya knelt down to meet her gaze. "Of course you can," she replied with a warm smile. "Strength isn't about size or power, it's about believing in yourself. And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, don't let them win." Moments like these reminded Maya why she kept pushing forward despite the growing demands on her. Time. It wasn't the applause or the accolades that fueled her, it was the knowledge that her actions were inspiring others to take control of their lives. Every handshake, every hug, every thank you note reinforced her belief that even small acts of courage could spark significant change. Beyond her speeches, Maya began working with organizations to create programs aimed at empowering marginalized communities. She partnered with shelters for survivors of domestic violence, teaching workshops on self-defense and confidence building. She collaborated with schools to develop curriculums focused on gender equality and respect. And she worked with local governments to implement stricter policies against public harassment, ensuring that incidents like the one she experienced wouldn't be brushed aside as just how things are. One evening, after wrapping up a workshop at a youth center, Maya found herself sitting alone in the empty hall, reflecting on how much her life had changed. Just months ago, she had been an ordinary commuter blending into the crowd. Now she was someone people looked to for guidance and inspiration. The weight of responsibility sometimes felt heavy, but she reminded herself of the reason she started this journey in the first place, to make the world a little safer, a little kinder. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from a friend sharing an article titled "How One Woman's Courage Inspired a Nation." Curious, Maya clicked the link and began reading. The piece detailed not only her story, but also the ripple effects it had created. Schools across the country were hosting discussions about bystander intervention. Social media campaigns encouraged people to report harassment without fear of judgment. Even celebrities were using their platforms to amplify her message, posting videos of themselves practicing basic self-defense moves and crediting Maya for the inspiration. But what struck Maya most was the section dedicated to personal stories. Readers had shared how her actions had impacted their lives, how they'd mustered the courage to confront a bully, stand up to a toxic partner, or simply demand respect in situations where they'd previously stayed silent. One woman wrote about how she finally reported a coworker who had been making inappropriate comments for years. Another described how she taught her son to intervene if he saw someone being mistreated. These stories weren't just testaments to Maya's influence. They were proof that collective action could drive real change. Feeling a mix of pride and humility, Maya closed the article and leaned back in her chair. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what might come next. Would her efforts lead to lasting reforms? Could she help create a culture where everyone felt safe and valued? The possibilities seemed endless, but she knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Change rarely came without resistance, and there would undoubtedly be challenges along the way. The next morning, Maya received an invitation that surprised her, a request to speak at a national conference on gender equality. The event brought together leaders, activists, and innovators from around the world, all working toward a common goal: creating a fairer, more inclusive society. At first, Maya hesitated. Speaking to a global audience felt daunting, especially since she still saw herself as just an ordinary person trying to make a difference. But then she remembered the faces of the people she'd met, the mothers, daughters, and students who had found strength in her story, and she accepted. When the day of the conference arrived, Maya stepped onto the stage feeling both nervous and excited. The room was packed, filled with people eager to hear what she had to say. As she began her speech, she noticed the energy shift. The audience leaned forward, hanging on her every word. She talked about the night on the subway, describing the fear and anger she had felt, but also the clarity that had driven her to act. She shared anecdotes from her workshops, highlighting the resilience she'd witnessed in others. And she ended with a call to action, urging everyone to use their voices and talents to challenge injustice wherever they saw it. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping as if they couldn't contain their admiration. Maya smiled, overwhelmed by the response. As she left the stage, several attendees stopped her to express their gratitude. One woman, a lawyer specializing in human rights, handed her a business card. "We should work together," she said firmly. "Your story needs to reach even more people." Over the following weeks, Maya found herself collaborating with individuals and organizations she never imagined she'd connect with. Together, they launched initiatives aimed at addressing systemic issues like workplace harassment, street violence, and unequal access to resources. They hosted webinars, published articles, and organized rallies, keeping the momentum alive. Each project brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to learn and grow. Through it all, Maya remained committed to staying true to herself. Despite the growing recognition, she refused to let fame define her. She continued teaching martial arts, prioritizing her students' progress over her own. She spent weekends volunteering at shelters, listening to stories of struggle and survival. And she carved out time for herself, finding solace in quiet moments away from the spotlight. One afternoon, while walking through a park, Maya noticed a group of children playing near a fountain. They were laughing and chasing each other, completely carefree. Watching them, she felt a surge of hope. These kids were growing up in a world where conversations about safety, respect, and equality were becoming louder and more urgent. Maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to face the same challenges she had. Maybe they'd grow up knowing their worth and demanding justice without hesitation. With a soft smile, Maya took a deep breath and continued her walk. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face whatever came her way. After all, she had already proven that even in the darkest moments, courage could shine through, and that was a lesson worth carrying forever. Years passed, and Maya's story became more than just a memory. It evolved into a legacy. The ripple effect of her actions on that subway train continued to spread, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. What had started as a single act of defiance grew into a movement that inspired countless individuals to stand up for themselves and others. People began referring to her not just as the woman who took down 3 attackers, but as a catalyst for change, someone who showed the world what courage looked like in its purest form. Maya herself remained deeply connected to the people. She aimed to help. She traveled less frequently now, choosing instead to focus her energy on building sustainable programs within her community. Her martial arts studio transformed into a hub of empowerment, offering free self-defense classes to women, children, and marginalized groups. Every Saturday morning, the space buzzed with activity, laughter, chatter, and the sound of feet shuffling across mats filled the air. Parents brought their kids, hoping they'd learn not only how to protect themselves, but also how to carry themselves with confidence. Women of all ages attended workshops designed to teach them practical skills while fostering a sense of solidarity. One of these women was an elderly grandmother who lived alone in a neighborhood notorious for petty crimes. At first, she hesitated to join the class, convinced she was too old to learn anything useful. But after weeks of gentle encouragement from Maya, she decided to give it a try. By the end of her first session, she beamed with pride as she demonstrated a simple wrist escape technique. "I never thought I'd be able to do something like this," she admitted during a break. "Now I feel like I can handle myself if anyone tries to bother me." Stories like hers reminded Maya why she kept showing up day after day. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about creating spaces where people felt seen, heard, and valued. And slowly but surely, those spaces began multiplying. Other instructors, inspired by Maya's work, started similar programs in their own towns. Schools incorporated elements of her teachings into physical education curriculums. Even local businesses got involved, sponsoring events and providing resources to ensure no one was turned away due to lack of funds. Despite her growing influence, Maya made a conscious effort to stay grounded. She still worked her day job as a software engineer, finding comfort in the routine of coding and problem solving. In many ways, it balanced out the intensity of her advocacy work. On evenings when she wasn't teaching or speaking, she spent time reflecting on how far she'd come and how much further there was to go. Change didn't happen overnight, and Maya knew that true progress required patience and persistence. Her role as a public figure also gave her opportunities to address systemic issues head-on. When policymakers proposed legislation aimed at improving safety in public spaces, they sought her input. She sat through meetings, sharing insights based on her experiences and advocating for measures that prioritize prevention over punishment. One such initiative led to the installation of better lighting and surveillance cameras in subway stations across the city, a small step, perhaps, but one that made a tangible difference for commuters. As the years went by, Maya noticed subtle shifts in societal attitudes. Conversations about harassment and inequality became louder and more frequent. People were less tolerant of behavior that once went unchecked, and bystanders were increasingly willing to intervene when they witnessed wrongdoing. Social media played a big part in this transformation, amplifying voices that might otherwise have gone unheard. Hashtags like #StandYourGround and #EmpowermentEveryday trended regularly, sparking discussions that reached corners of the globe Maya had never visited. But even as the world changed around her, Maya stayed focused on the human element. She believed that real progress happened person by person, moment by moment. That belief guided her when she wrote a book titled 7 Seconds of Courage, a collection of stories about resilience and self-discovery. Each chapter highlighted a different individual, from a teenager overcoming bullying to a man learning to challenge toxic masculinity in his friend group. The book wasn't just about Maya. It was about the collective strength of humanity, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. When the book hit shelves, it quickly became a bestseller, praised for its authenticity and relatability. Readers appreciated how Maya wove her personal journey into broader themes of empowerment and justice. Bookstores hosted signings where fans lined up for hours, eager to meet the woman whose story had touched their lives. Some came bearing gifts, handwritten notes, drawings, or tokens of gratitude. Others simply wanted to shake her hand and say thank you. One evening, during a signing event, a young boy approached her table clutching a worn copy of the book. His face lit up as he handed it to her. "Can you sign this for my mom?" he asked. Shyly, "She says you're her hero." Maya smiled, taking the book gently. "What's your mom's name?" she asked. "Anita," the boy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Carefully, she wrote a message inside the cover. Asterisk to Anita, whose courage inspires us all. Asterisk. As she handed the book back, the boy grinned ear to ear. "Thank you," he exclaimed before running off to find his mother. Moments like these reminded Maya that her impact extended beyond statistics or headlines. It was personal, it was about connection, about reminding people that they weren't alone. Whether she was signing books, teaching students, or speaking at conferences, her mission remained the same: to empower others to believe in themselves. Eventually, Maya stepped back from the limelight, allowing younger voices to take center stage. She mentored aspiring activists and encouraged them to share their own stories, knowing that diversity of perspective was key to driving lasting change. Though she scaled back her public appearances, her influence endured. Schools named scholarships after her. Streets bore plaques commemorating her contributions. And every year, communities organized events celebrating courage and resilience, often inviting her to speak briefly or cut a ceremonial ribbon. In her later years, Maya found joy in simpler pleasures. She spent mornings tending to a small garden outside her home, nurturing plants that reminded her of growth and renewal. Afternoons were reserved for long walks, during which she reflected on her journey and marveled at how life had unfolded. Sometimes, strangers would stop her along the way, thanking her for inspiring them to stand tall in the face of adversity. She always responded with a warm smile and a few kind words, grateful for the chance to make a difference. Looking back, Maya realized that her story wasn't just hers, it belonged to everyone who had ever stood up for themselves or someone else. It belonged to the teenage girl who learned to defend herself, the grandmother who discovered newfound confidence, and the countless others who refused to let fear dictate their lives. Through her actions, she had shown the world that courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about acting despite fear, about believing in your worth even when others tried to diminish it. And so, Maya's legacy lived on not as a tale of one woman's bravery, but as a testament to the power of collective action. Her 7 seconds on the subway had sparked a lifetime of change, proving that sometimes standing your ground could move mountains.